The lecture hall for advanced political theory was packed with students, with the usual sense of coffee, old books, and human anxiety. But for Lucas Blackwood, heir to the Blood Moon pack, there was a new, jarring note cutting through the familiar haze. It was a scent of cold mountain air and wild juniper, a scent that made the wolf within him stir with immediate, instinctual hostility. He didn't need to look to know. A Crescent pack wolf was here. His childhood friend and beta-to-be, Dylan, elbowed him sharply in the ribs, his own posture stiffening. "Lucas," he muttered, a low growl underlying his voice. "Don't." But it was too late. Lucas's gaze, a stormy gray that mirrored his father's, swept across the room and locked onto the source. She was sitting near the front, her posture impossibly straight, her dark hair falling in a sleek curtain down her back. Regina Crestfall, daughter of Alpha Timothy, the sworn enemy of his father. He knew her from pack briefings, from whispered warnings, but seeing her in the flesh was different. She was sharp. All elegant angles and a cool, dismissive beauty that felt like a challenge. As if feeling his stare, she turned. Her eyes, a piercing, crystalline blue, met his. There was no flicker of recognition, only a flat, icy assessment before she turned back to her notebook, effectively dismissing him. The insult was profound. Their professor, a well-meaning human oblivious to the predator dynamics in his classroom, started the lesson. It was a debate on Machiavelli's The Prince. Lucas, raised on strategy and the uncompromising realities of pack leadership, was in his element. He made a point about the necessity of perceived strength. A clear, confident voice cut through the room from the front row. "That's a rather simplistic, brutish interpretation," Regina said, not even looking at him. "Machiavelli argues for pragmatism, not just brute force. A leader who is only feared is a leader who is one rebellion away from a knife in the back. A truly strong leader balances fear with respect." The class fell silent. Every human eye darted between them, sensing the electric animosity. Lucas stood, his chair scraping loudly. Respect is earned through strength, not coddling. A pack, or a principality, that doubts its alpha's power is already lost. And so it began. What started in political theory spilled into every other class they shared. In economics, they argued over resource allocation models that mirrored their pack's territorial disputes. In literature, they clashed over the symbolism in Romeo and Juliet, with Lucas calling it a cautionary tale about sentimental weakness, and Regina labeling his view tragically devoid of nuance. Their rivalry became campus legend. The other students, both fascinated and intimidated, started keeping a literal leaderboard on a whiteboard in the student lounge. It was titled Lucas versus Regina, with points awarded for debate wins, quiz scores, and even perceived verbal burns in the cafeteria line. The score was always neck and neck. One day, after a particularly brutal philosophy seminar where Regina had dismantled his argument about existential purpose with razor-sharp logic, Lucas stormed out, Dylan hurrying behind him. "She's insufferable," Lucas snarled, running a hand through his dark hair. "She twists everything. She thinks she's so much smarter than everyone." "She is pretty smart," Dylan ventured cautiously, earning himself a glare. "I'm just saying, maybe don't engage? Your father wouldn't want you causing an incident." "My father would want me to show that Crestfall which her place," Lucas retorted, his wolf itching for a fight, any fight. Meanwhile, Regina was in the library, calmly reshelving a book. Her friend, a sharp-witted she-wolf named Anya, leaned against the stacks. "You certainly know how to get under his skin, Gina. It's almost an art form." A faint, cold smile touched Regina's lips. The Blood Moon pack has always valued brawn over brains. Lucas Blackwood is a living testament to that. He's all growl and no strategy. It's pathetic, really. But as she said the words, she remembered the fierce intensity in his gray eyes, the way he never backed down. It wasn't just pathetic. It was aggravatingly persistent. They were two sides of an ancient coin, forced into the same space, their every interaction a proxy war for their families. They hated each other with a passion that was taught to them from birth. But in the quiet of their own minds, away from the watchful eyes of their peers and the leaderboard that tracked their every move, a treacherous, unwanted thought sometimes surfaced, the frustrating, undeniable realization that their greatest rival was also, infuriatingly, their only equal. The following day, at the library, Regina slammed her textbook shut with a final, satisfying thud. Her science project was perfect, a meticulously detailed model that would undoubtedly crush Lucas Blackwood's in tomorrow's presentation. Finally, Anya groaned, stretching her arms over her head. Do you have any idea what time it is? We're going to be the only ones on campus. It's worth it, Regina said, a determined glint in her blue eyes as she packed her bag. I want to see the look on his face when he realizes his brute force approach to the project doesn't hold a candle to actual precision. Anya just shook her head. You two are going to be the death of me. They stepped out into the cold night air. The path to their hostel, a lonely ribbon of concrete, cutting through a dense patch of woods. The usual campus sounds were absent, replaced by an eerie silence. Anya shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. I don't like this. Let's hurry. They'd only gone a few yards when the shadows at the edge of the woods began to move. 5 figures emerged, moving with an unnerving, fluid grace that was decidedly not human. They fanned out, surrounding the 2 girls smoothly, cutting off any escape. The leader stepped forward, a cruel smile on his pale, handsome face. Marcus, a vampire from a prominent clan, and a fellow student Regina had always found insufferably arrogant. Regina Crestfall, he purred, his voice like silk over ice. Out so late. It's dangerous for a lady of your standing. What do you want, Marcus? Regina snapped, shifting her weight into a defensive stance. Anya pressed close to her back, a low growl rumbling in her own throat. It's simple really, Marcus said, his red eyes gleaming in the darkness. I've grown tired of watching you from afar. Your alpha bloodline is impressive. Together, we could be formidable. I've come to collect what I want. You. Over my dead body, Regina snarled. She moved first, a blur of motion, her fist connecting with the jaw of the vampire on her left. Anya kicked out at another, but they were outnumbered and outmatched in the dark. Regina fought with the ferocity of her lineage, her movements sharp and precise, but the vampires were faster, stronger. They toyed with them, their laughter echoing in the silent night. Help! Anya screamed, her voice piercing the stillness. Somebody, help us! But the road remained deserted. No lights flicked on. No doors opened. Hope began to curdle into cold, sharp fear in Regina's gut. Marcus grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. Scream all you want, little wolf. No one is coming. Just as his cold fingers brushed her neck, a sound tore through the night that made every vampire freeze. It was the deep, thunderous roar of a fully transformed lichen, followed by another. From the darkness of the path behind them, 2 massive wolves erupted. One was a hulking beast of shadow-gray fur and burning amber eyes, Lucas. The other, slightly smaller but just as fierce, was Dylan. They hit the vampire circle like a force of nature. Lucas slammed into Marcus, sending him flying into a tree. Dylan tore into another vampire, his jaws clamping down on its arm with a sickening crunch. The vampires, caught completely by surprise, scrambled to defend themselves. The night filled with the sounds of snarls, hisses, and pained cries. It was over in less than a minute. The vampires, badly injured and humiliated, fled back into the woods, Marcus shooting a venomous look over his shoulder before disappearing into the shadows. The 2 wolves turned, their chests heaving, muzzles stained with dark vampire blood. Regina stood panting, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked from Dylan's wolf to Lucas's. His gray fur was bristling, his powerful body still tense with battle rage. Their eyes met, her crystal blue to his burning amber. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving her weak and trembling. She took a shaky step towards him. Why? She breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Why did you help me? We're enemies. Lucas's wolf form began to shrink, the fur receding, bones reshaping until he stood before her as a man, his clothes torn, his face smudged with dirt and blood. His gray eyes held hers, filled with a complexity she couldn't decipher, anger, concern, and something else, something fierce and protective. He opened his mouth to answer, but the world chose that moment to tilt violently on its axis for Regina. The shock, the exertion, the relief, it all crashed down on her at once. Her eyes rolled back, her knees buckled, and the last thing she felt was the surprising strength of Lucas Blackwood's arms catching her as she fell into a dead faint. Hours later, sunlight, warm and unfamiliar, pried Regina's eyes open. She blinked, disoriented. This wasn't her dorm room. The walls were a deep, masculine gray, the furniture sturdy and simple. And there was a scent, a mix of pine, leather, and something uniquely wild that was both unsettling and strangely comforting. Then she felt the weight on her hand. Her head turned on the pillow. Lucas Blackwood was slumped in a chair beside the bed, fast asleep. His dark hair was tousled, and the usual stern set of his jaw was softened in slumber. One of his hands was wrapped firmly around hers. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up her arm the moment she noticed the contact. It wasn't a painful shock, but a surge of something warm and vibrant, a connection that felt like a locked door swinging open deep inside her. The sensation jolted Lucas awake. His gray eyes flew open, instantly alert, and found hers. For a suspended second, they just stared at each other, the strange current still humming between their joined hands. Then, embarrassment and a lifetime of ingrained hostility crashed over Regina. She snatched her hand back as if burned. The loss of contact was jarring. "What am I doing here?" she demanded, her voice raspy. The memory of the vampires, the fight, and Lucas's wolf, it all flooded back. And with it, a paranoid, defensive thought took root. Was this your plan? Did you send those vampires after me just so you could play the hero? The warmth in Lucas's eyes vanished, replaced by an icy fury that was far more terrifying than any battlefield glare. He shot to his feet, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. "You think I would do that?" His voice was low, dangerously calm. "You think I would orchestrate an attack on you, involving bloodsuckers, just for some twisted game?" He let out a short, bitter laugh. "I knew I should have listened to my instincts. I should have left them to do whatever they wanted with you." He turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him with a force that shook the wall. The silence he left behind was deafening. Regina's accusation hung in the air, tasting foul and foolish in her own mouth. The moment the words had left her lips, she'd felt a sharp, answering pang, not in her own heart, but through that strange, new connection. It was a flash of pure, unadulterated hurt, followed by a wall of cold anger. It wasn't a thought she heard, it was a feeling she felt, as clearly as if it were her own. And with stunning clarity, she knew. Lucas Blackwood, her rival, her enemy, would challenge her, infuriate her, and compete with her until his last breath. But he would never, ever allow someone else to harm her. The bond, whatever it was, told her that truth as surely as her own name. A profound hurt, this one entirely her own fault, settled in her chest. She had wounded him, deeply. The door creaked open again, and Anya slipped in, her face pale with worry. "Oh, thank the moon goddess, you're awake," she breathed, rushing to the bedside and checking Regina for injuries. "I was so scared. Those vampires, if Lucas and Dylan hadn't shown up." "I know," Regina whispered, her gaze fixed on the closed door. "Did you thank him?" Anya asked, following her friend's stare. Regina shook her head, shame heating her cheeks. "No. I accused him of sending the vampires." Anya's eyes widened in horror. "Regina, how could you? He saved our lives. He fought for us." "I know," Regina cried, frustration and regret mingling in her voice. "I know it was stupid. The moment I said it, I knew it was wrong." She looked at Anya, her blue eyes pleading for understanding. "There's something. A feeling. I just know he didn't do it. Anya studied her for a long moment, a dawning comprehension in her eyes. She squeezed Regina's hand. Then you have to fix this. You have to find him, apologize, and thank him properly. It's the only right thing to do. Regina looked away, toward the door Lucas had slammed. The idea of apologizing to Lucas Blackwood felt like swallowing broken glass. But the ache of the bond, the hurt she had caused, was worse. She took a deep, resigned breath. I know, she said softly. I promise, I will. 2 weeks crawled by, and the campus felt unervingly empty. The whiteboard leaderboard in the student lounge remained unchanged, a silent monument to a rivalry that had abruptly halted. Lucas Blackwood was absent. He hadn't shown up for political theory, economics, or even the science presentation Regina had slaved over. His empty seat was a constant, nagging presence. Regina's wolf, which had been a restless, whispering thing since the night of the attack, was now a constant ache under her skin. It paced and whined, fixated on the missing heir of the Blood Moon pack. She tried to ignore it, to channel the energy into her studies, but the worry was a thorn in her side. Anya, have you seen him? She finally asked one afternoon, trying to sound casual as they packed their books. Lucas? No, Anya said, her brow furrowed. It's weird, right? Even Dylan's been quiet. That was the final straw. If Dylan, Lucas's shadow, was being withdrawn, something was definitely wrong. They cornered him by the lockers after their last class. Dylan, where's Lucas? Regina asked, her tone leaving no room for evasion. Dylan shifted his weight, avoiding her gaze. I don't know. He's busy with pack stuff. The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. Regina felt a flash of anger, but she bit it back. Pushing Dylan would only make him clam up more. Instead, she just nodded stiffly and walked away, a plan solidifying in her mind. She was going to his apartment. She had to see for herself. The walk to his off-campus building felt both endless and far too short. Her wolf was a frenzy of excitement, its restlessness replaced by a keen, eager anticipation that both thrilled and annoyed her. By the time she stood outside his door, her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, her hand raised to knock. The door swung open before her knuckles could connect. And there he was. Shirtless. His chest glistened with a fine sheen of sweat, muscles corded from what looked like an intense training session. His dark hair was deliciously tousled, and his hands were wrapped in white gauze. The scent of him, pure, potent male and exertion, hit her like a physical blow. It took every ounce of her self-control not to close the distance between them right then and there. Lucas's gray eyes widened in surprise for a fraction of a second before they shuttered, becoming cool and distant. Regina. She swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. Aren't you going to invite me in? State your business, he replied, his voice flat and cold. The dismissal stung, reigniting her own defensive pride. Fine. I don't want to be here either, she flared, her cheeks heating. I just came to say 2 things. Thank you for saving me. And I'm sorry for accusing you. It was wrong. She turned on her heel, humiliation burning through her. That's all. She'd only taken 2 steps when his hand shot out, his gauze-wrapped fingers gently but firmly encircling her wrist. The contact sent another one of those electric currents shooting up her arm, stronger than before. Is that the only reason you came? He asked. His voice had changed. The coldness was gone, replaced by a low, soft intensity that baffled and disarmed her completely. Regina turned back to face him, her words stuck in her throat. The internal turbulence was overwhelming, a storm of conflicting emotions, anger, pride, worry, and a desperate, clawing need she couldn't name. Her wolf was howling inside her, urging her forward. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. That was all the answer he needed. In one fluid motion, Lucas pulled her across the threshold into his apartment, kicked the door shut, and spun her into his arms. His gaze dropped to her lips, and all the coldness, all the distance, vanished from his eyes, replaced by a raw, hungry yearning. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle or questioning. It was hungry, a claiming born of weeks of tension and unspoken attraction. But beneath the hunger, there was a shocking sweetness, a reverence that made her knees weak. It was an apology, a thank you, and a confession, all conveyed in the desperate meeting of their lips. Regina's carefully constructed walls crumbled to dust. Her hands, which had been poised to push him away, instead fisted in his sweaty hair, pulling him closer as she kissed him back with equal fervor. The leaderboard, the rival packs, the years of hatred, none of it mattered. There was only this. Only him. The world snapped back into focus with the sound of their ragged breaths. Regina tore her lips from Lucas's, stumbling back a step as if the very air between them had become electrified. Her hand flew to her mouth, which still tingled with the devastating sweetness of his kiss. The reality of what was happening crashed down on her. The bond. The pull she'd been feeling wasn't just attraction, it was the sacred, unbreakable mate bond. Why? She gasped, her voice trembling. Why didn't you reject it? You could have. We both could have. Lucas's expression was a torrent of conflict, desire, fear, and a profound, aching vulnerability. He ran a hand through his already messy hair. That's why I've been hiding, Regina, he burst out, his voice raw. Do you think I wanted this? The daughter of my father's greatest enemy? Every instinct, every lesson I've ever been taught, screams that this is a disaster. But I can't. I can't fight it. He took a step toward her, his gray eyes holding hers captive. I tried. I stayed away. I trained until my hands bled, trying to exhaust the thought of you out of my head. But it's pointless. He stopped in front of her, his gaze intense, honest. I love you, Regina. I think I have from the moment you called my interpretation of Machiavelli brutish. I want to mate with you. For real. The words were everything her wolf longed to hear, and everything her mind screamed was impossible. Panic, sweet and terrifying, seized her. I can't, she stammered, backing toward the door. This is too much. She didn't wait for a response. She turned, wrenched the door open, and fled. She ran all the way back to her hostel, Lucas's confession echoing in her ears, a mantra that both thrilled and terrified her. I love you. I want to mate with you. She burst into her room, slamming the door behind her and leaning against it, her chest heaving. Anya jumped up from her desk. Gods, Regina! What happened? How did it go? The story tumbled out in a breathless, chaotic rush. The shirtless Lucas, the cold reception, her apology, the kiss, and finally, his staggering confession. Anya's initial reaction was a wide-eyed smile. A mate bond? With Lucas? Oh, Gina, that's incredible. I knew there was something. But then the practical reality set in. Her smile faded. But our packs, our fathers, they'll never allow it. This could start a war, not end one. I know, Regina whispered, sinking onto her bed and burying her face in her hands. What am I going to do, Anya? Before Anya could answer, the door to their room opened without a knock. Alpha Timothy Crestville stood in the doorway, his presence immediately sucking all the air from the room. He was a tall, imposing man, his face carved from the same cold granite as the mountains he ruled. Regina, he said, his voice devoid of warmth. Good, you're both here. I have news. Regina and Anya stared, frozen. I have secured a powerful alliance for our pack, he announced, a note of triumph in his voice. An alliance that will finally give us the edge we need against the Blood Moon pack. In 2 weeks' time, you will be wed to Alpha Kale's son, from the Stonefang pack. The ceremony will be held at the full moon. The words landed like a physical blow. Regina felt the blood drain from her face. The world tilted. Wed. She choked out. Father, no. I don't even know him. Alpha Timothy's gaze was unwavering, cold as ice. It is not a request, Regina. It is your duty. Prepare yourself. With that, he turned and left, closing the door behind him, leaving a silence more deafening than any scream. Regina looked at Anya, her eyes wide with horror. The joy of the mate bond and the terror of an arranged marriage collided inside her, shattering the future she had just begun to imagine. Lucas's love felt like a lifeline she was now being forcibly dragged away from. The following day, Lucas returned to campus, a new-found determination squaring his shoulders. He had confessed his heart to his mate. The world was terrifying and complicated, but it was also finally clear. He walked into advanced political theory, his gaze instinctively seeking out the front row. The seat was empty. A flicker of unease sparked in his chest. Perhaps she was late. But as the lecture began and dragged on, Regina's absence became a glaring void. Anya's seat was empty too. The spark of unease ignited into a full-blown fire of agitation. He cornered Dylan after class. "Where is she?" Dylan shrugged, genuinely perplexed. "I don't know, man. I haven't seen her, or Anya, all day." "This isn't like her," Lucas growled, his wolf stirring anxiously. "She wouldn't miss a class, especially not this one. Not after." He trailed off, the memory of their kiss heating his blood. "Maybe she's sick," Dylan offered weakly. "Anya, too." At the same time, Lucas's eyes narrowed. "No. Something's wrong." He strode towards the administration office, Dylan hurrying behind him. The human proprietor, intimidated by Lucas's intense presence, checked the records with trembling hands. "Ah, yes. Miss Crestfall. Her father, Alpha Timothy, came by yesterday afternoon. Signed her out for urgent family business. He said she'd be away for some time." Family business. The words landed like a lead weight in Lucas's gut. Alpha Timothy. The man who would rather see his daughter dead than mated to a Blood Moon heir. What kind of business? Lucas pressed, his voice a low rumble. I really don't know, sir," the proprietor stammered. "He's her father. He didn't provide details." Lucas turned away, his mind racing. This was no coincidence. This was happening because of him, because of the bond. "I'm going to the Crescent Packlands," he announced to Dylan as they stepped back into the sunlight. Dylan grabbed his arm. "Are you insane?" "Lucas, that's a suicide mission. You'll be torn apart on sight. Our packs have been feuding for ages." Lucas shook off his friend's grip, his gray eyes burning with a fierce, unshakable resolve. "I don't care. You have to care. You're the future Alpha. This could start a war. A day without her, not knowing if she's safe, not being able to touch her." Lucas's voice dropped, thick with emotion. "That is a fate worse than any war, Dylan. Death in the bosom of my love is better than 1,000 days without her." Dylan stared at him, his jaw slack with disbelief. The words, the raw devotion in Lucas's voice, were unlike anything he had ever heard from his pragmatic, battle-hardened friend. "Lucas, what are you saying?" Lucas met his beta's stunned gaze, the truth finally spoken aloud without shame or hesitation. "Regina Crestfall is my true mate." The confession hung in the air between them, silencing Dylan's protests. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by a grim acceptance. A mate bond explained everything: the intense rivalry, the irresistible pull, the reckless, all-consuming need to protect her, even from her own family. The political nightmare was unimaginable. But the primal truth of the bond was undeniable. Lucas didn't wait for a response. His path was clear. He turned and began walking, not toward his next class, but toward the forest that bordered the campus, his destination fixed, the heart of enemy territory, and the woman who held his heart. On getting to the pack, the scent of the Crescent pack border was a familiar poison in the air: wild juniper and cold stone, the very essence of Regina. Lucas stood at the invisible line, his chest heaving from the run, his every instinct screaming at him to cross. 2 hulking guards materialized from the trees, their snarls echoing his own inner turmoil. "Halt, Blood Moon!" one barked, baring his fangs. Turn back. No one crosses today. There's a sacred ceremony at the pack house. Lucas's blood ran cold. A ceremony. What ceremony? He demanded, his voice a gravelly threat. The second guard smirked, enjoying the chance to deliver the blow. The Luna ceremony. Alpha Timothy's daughter is being mated to the Stonefang heir. A strong alliance. Now, be on your way, mongrel. The words, Luna ceremony, and mated detonated inside Lucas's skull. A red haze descended over his vision. The careful control he'd maintained shattered. An angry guttural roar erupted from him, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage that made the guards flinch. He didn't give them a chance to recover. He shifted in a blur of motion and power. The two guards, trained warriors though they were no match for a Blood Moon heir defending his mate. Lucas moved with feral efficiency, disabling them with brutal, non-lethal blows, a dislocated shoulder, a shattered knee, before they could even fully transform. They crumpled to the forest floor with pained yelps. Ignoring their cries, Lucas ran. He was a dark streak through the enemy woods, his powerful legs eating up the ground. He could hear the commotion behind him as more guards gave chase, but their howls of pursuit grew fainter. Nothing in this world could catch him when his mate was at the end of the path. The Crescent packhouse loomed ahead, decorated with garlands of night-blooming flowers. The sounds of celebration, music, laughter, chatter, drifted out, each sound a fresh insult. He shifted back to his human form, using the chaos of the arriving guests to slip inside unnoticed, blending into the shadows of the grand hall. And then he saw her. Regina. She was seated on a raised dais, radiant in a gown of deep blue silk that made her eyes look like captured stars. But her beauty was a statue's beauty, cold and still. Her face was pale, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. There was no joy in her eyes, only a desperate, trapped horror. Beside her sat her parents, Alpha Timothy looking smug and triumphant, and a hulking, arrogant-looking stranger Lucas assumed was the Stonefang heir. The sight of another man so close to his mate, in a ceremony meant to bind her to him forever, unleashed the wolf completely. Reason fled. There was only the bond, the claim, the absolute, non-negotiable truth. As the officiating elder began to speak the ancient words of binding, Lucas stepped out from the shadows. I forbid it. His voice, laced with the power of his alpha bloodline and the fury of a wronged mate, cut through the celebratory noise like a thunderclap. The music screeched to a halt. Every head in the room turned. Regina's head snapped up. Her eyes, wide with shock, found his across the crowded room. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief and joy washed over her features, so potent that Lucas felt it through their bond. She made to stand, to go to him. But her father's hand was like a steel vice on her arm, forcing her back down into her seat. Alpha Timothy's face was a mask of cold, murderous rage. The silence in the hall was absolute, broken only by the low, warning growl that rumbled in Lucas's chest. He stood his ground, his gaze locked on his mate, a king challenging an entire kingdom for his queen. For a terrifying moment, the grand hall was frozen. Alpha Timothy's command, guards, seize him. Throw this Blood Moon filth in the dungeons. Shattered the silence. Several large guards surged forward, grabbing Lucas's arms. He fought, a tempest of fury, but outnumbered and surrounded, he was eventually subdued, his arms wrenched behind his back. As they began to drag him away, his eyes, burning with a desperate love, remained locked on Regina. Her wolf was clawing its way up her throat, howling in protest. She strained against her father's iron grip, a whimper escaping her lips. Just as they reached the doors, they burst open with a deafening crash. Standing in the doorway, flanked by a host of grim-faced Blood Moon soldiers, was Alpha Martin. Dylan stood just behind his shoulder, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. Regina's suspicion was confirmed. Dylan had raced back for reinforcements. Alpha Martin was an older, more weathered version of his son, but his power was a palpable force that filled the room. His steely gaze swept over the scene, landing on his son being manhandled by Crescent guards. A single, raised eyebrow was all it took. The guards, sensing the shift in power, immediately released Lucas and backed away. Regina's heart pounded. This was the feared Alpha of the Blood Moon pack, and he held more authority in his silent presence than her father did in his loudest commands. To everyone's astonishment, Alpha Martin walked calmly to the center of the hall and gave a curt, formal nod to Alpha Timothy. "Timothy," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I apologize for my son's impulsive behavior. He will be disciplined." He turned to Lucas, his expression unreadable. "Let's go." He reached for Lucas's arm, but Lucas snatched his hand away violently. "No," Lucas declared, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. He turned and pointed directly at Regina. "I am not leaving without her." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Regina felt a dizzying mix of dread and exhilaration. This was it. The point of no return. Alpha Timothy spluttered with rage. "You see, Martin? Your boy is delusional. He dishonors my daughter and this alliance." Alpha Martin's jaw tightened. "Lucas, this is not the way. The moon goddess would not pair our bloodlines. It is a mistake." "It is not a mistake," Lucas roared, his gaze pleading with Regina now. "She is my true mate. Tell them." All eyes turned to Regina. Her father's grip tightened, his eyes warning her to stay silent. But looking at Lucas, seeing the raw, unwavering faith in his eyes, her own courage solidified. She took a deep, shaking breath and stood, pulling her arm free from her father's grasp. "It's true," she said, her voice initially a whisper, then growing stronger. "He is my mate. I feel the bond." The shock on both Alpha's faces was absolute. Her father's turned purple with fury. "Regina, sit down. You will marry the Stonefang heir as planned." But Regina was already stepping down from the dais, walking towards Lucas. Her suitor, the Stonefang heir, stood up, his face a mask of humiliation. "This is an insult," he snarled, and with a sharp gesture to his family, they stormed out of the hall. Alpha Timothy's rants and orders for her to return fell on deaf ears. She reached Lucas, and his hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. The moment they touched, a visible calm settled over both of them, the bond humming with rightness. Regina turned to face the two most powerful alphas in the region, her chin held high. "For decades, our packs have fought," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "We have spilled blood over borders and pride. But here we stand, your only children, bound by the moon goddess herself. You have a choice. You can continue this senseless, age-old feud, or you can bury the hatchet. For us. For a future where our children don't have to hide." The hall was utterly silent. Alpha Martin looked from his son's determined face to Regina's brave one. He saw not a political disaster, but the end of a war. He saw a union stronger than any alliance. He looked at Alpha Timothy, whose rage was slowly being replaced by a stunned, weary calculation. The future of both packs was standing in front of them, holding hands. Alpha Martin let out a long, slow breath. Then, he gave a single, decisive nod. "The girl speaks sense." Alpha Timothy stared at his daughter, seeing not a disobedient child, but a Luna in the making. The fight seemed to drain out of him. He looked at the joined hands of the Blood Moon heir and the Crescent daughter, and he saw, for the first time, not a betrayal but a bridge. "A truce," Alpha Timothy said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "We will discuss a truce." The hall, which had been holding its breath, erupted into a wave of stunned murmurs that quickly swelled into cheers and jubilant howls. The war was over. A new era had begun, born from a forbidden love that proved stronger than generations of hate. Lucas pulled Regina into his arms, and under the approving gaze of their reconciled fathers, he finally, properly, kissed his Luna. A wave of joyous disbelief had washed over the Crescent Pack Hall. The tension of a potential war had been transformed into the electric buzz of a celebration. The decorations, once meant for a political alliance, now seemed fitting for a true, fated union. Seeing the stunned but accepting look on Alpha Timothy's face, Lucas seized the moment. He turned to the elderly pack elder who had been about to officiate the previous ceremony. "Elder," Lucas said, his voice strong and clear. "You were prepared to speak the binding words. Would you do us the honor? For a mating blessed by the moon goddess herself." The elder, a wise smile crinkling his eyes, nodded. "It would be my greatest privilege." What followed was not a planned, formal event, but something far more powerful. There, in the center of the hall, surrounded by members of both rival packs, Lucas and Regina faced each other. They spoke their vows not from memory, but from the heart, their promises of loyalty, strength, and eternal love echoing the newfound peace between their families. As the elder proclaimed them bound for life, a unified howl rose from every wolf present, Crescent and Blood Moon alike, a harmonious song that sealed the truce in a way no signed treaty ever could. After the ceremony, the hall erupted into a genuine festival. And the most astonishing sight of all was at the head table. Alpha Martin and Alpha Timothy, once sworn enemies, were sitting together, a bottle of rich red wine between them. Tentative, gruff conversation slowly gave way to genuine laughter as they reminisced about their own youth, finding unexpected common ground now that the weight of their feud had been lifted. Seeing their fathers deep in conversation, Lucas took Regina's hand. "Come with me," he whispered, leading her away from the crowd to a quiet balcony overlooking the moonlit woods. He pulled her into his arms, the bond between them humming with a profound, peaceful completion. "My Luna," he murmured against her hair. "My Alpha," she replied, her heart so full it felt it might burst. The rivalry, the fear, the arranged marriage, it was all a distant nightmare. This, here in his arms, was the only reality that mattered. A few days later, as the new truce was formally established, Regina traveled with Lucas and his family to the Blood Moon Pact territory. She was welcomed not as an enemy or a political pawn, but as the fated Luna who had brought peace. Her sharp mind and gentle strength, once used to compete with Lucas, now complemented his leadership perfectly. Years flowed by like a peaceful river. The border between the packs became a place of trade and friendship, not conflict. Lucas and Regina ruled side by side, their love story becoming the foundation of a lasting peace. They had children who grew up knowing both sets of grandparents, their heritage a blend of Crescent resilience and Blood Moon strength. They lived a life filled with a love that had risked everything, a testament to the truth that sometimes, the greatest strength is not in winning a battle, but in having the courage to lay down your arms for the one you love. And they lived, truly, happily ever after.